Welcome to another edition of the PowerChat sponsored by Blue Mark Energy. Today, we invite in Kansas State women's basketball coach Jeff Mittie to talk about his career in women's basketball, but he almost ended up in the baseball world. Let's get right to it with Coach Jeff Mittie. Welcome to another edition of the PowerChat sponsored by Blue Mark Energy in the GPC's WTC Gig Powered Studios. Women's basketball coach Jeff Mittie's with us. Coach, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
You don't have a clock that the NCAA regulates. I can just keep you here.
No, the student athletes are more protected than the coaches. I can assure you in that regards.
That's probably good. It's all good. So getting ready to go to the Bahamas. Before we dig into your past, I'm sorry you have to do that for work, go to the Bahamas.
It really is. And
I'm so sorry.
And the weather's been so great here this time of the year now, but I think it turns next week, which will just be beautiful to fly out when the weather turns.
But I was getting ready for this. I'm like, well, that shirt's pretty spring. And I'm like, well, it's 60 degrees today. I'm just going to wear this shirt.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Blue Springs. Did you grow up there your whole life?
Independence, Kansas City.
Yeah.
Kansas City area, yeah.
So you're just a Kansas City kid. What was life like in Independence and Blue Springs?
You know, I loved it. Just growing up kind of in Kansas City, obviously Chiefs, Royals fan. And then in high school, I worked at Royal Stadium. A ton of my friends worked there. And so, you know, pretty good gig to just kind of hang out all summer and work a little bit and get to watch a little baseball. And of course, back when I was growing up there, you go late 70s. That was such a great time for baseball. And so it was great. It's been fun to be back too.
You didn't wander far. You end up in St. Joe.
Yep. I
spent some time in St. Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So the Royals have been really close to you, haven't they? They've been a special part of you. I mean, that '85 team. And
yeah, you know, definitely. Well, when I was in high school, it was $1.50 to get into GA, so you could literally for $1.50 just walk up and get into GA, and those were the seats, you know, down both foul pole areas, and it was a different stadium. They've done a great job with the redesign, but I watched a ton of baseball. And then back then they opened the gates at about the 6th or 7th inning, right around there. So you could go, for us, if you weren't working, you could go out there in the 7th inning and watch the last 3 innings and hang out with some of your friends afterwards. So that was great. And then after college, my college basketball coach helped me get an internship there in their PR department. So got to meet some great people there. Worked for Dean Bogalar, worked for Steve Fink, who now is the media relations director at South Carolina. Steve actually came down to TCU. I helped him get the job as media relations director at TCU when I was the coach there. So it's
good
just
for him.
fun.
He was nice to you, or
Yeah. Well, you know, he was kind of funny because my boss at the time, Eric Hyman, had said, "We're looking for a media relations director. Call your guy with the Royals and just see if he's got anybody out there." And Steve was like, you know, it might be time for, I'm kind of looking at some different things. And so it just worked out that way.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Sports is kind of like that, though.
Yeah,
you know, you get a lot of connections over the years. If you're in it long enough, you have a lot of friendships, a lot of people in different areas.
I was going to talk about this later, but that Royals internship, what all did you do?
It was very interesting because game day, basically what I did was just keep the book on computer. So statistically, just keep all that. The interesting part was after the game because I was in charge of the opposing team's manager's quotes.
Oh.
So got to see some really interesting stuff in the clubhouse, you know. Got to see some chairs broken, tables. Got to see just a lot of interesting things in the clubhouse. You know, I don't know how they do the interviews now, but you know, when I was doing them, we just went into the manager's office.
Right.
And you just stood there, and 4 or 5 reporters would be asking questions, and I was just in charge of kind of monitoring that and going up and typing up the notes from that. And yeah, it was fun. And then the other stuff I did was postseason media guide stuff. Helped out with those things. Helped out with the draft class and putting all the notes for that stuff. So yeah, it was fun.
So you've kind of been on the other side a little bit.
A little bit. I mean, it was a short 5 months.
Yeah,
but got to see the other side of it. Yeah.
And you wisely didn't stay on that side.
Yeah, you know, it was kind of funny because at the time I was getting ready to go to grad school and just kind of when I went back to Missouri Western, they wanted me to do a variety of things. So I was able to have my hand in a lot of stuff. I was helping the athletic director with some projects. I was a GA for baseball. I was GA for basketball. So I got to do a lot of different things, which kind of set me to, the coaching bug kind of came late to me, and that this is what I really want to do.
When you were an athlete, you played basketball and baseball at MoWo. What was your better sport?
Probably baseball at the time. I mean, basketball was probably better out of high school. And then in pitching, I kind of developed late. And then as stuff happens, I tore my arm about my sophomore year and kind of battled back from that and just kind of, but the best pitch I threw was a slider, and that was really hard on the elbow, and I threw it a bunch. And then basketball, I was just kind of first guard off the bench, kind of a role player that just, yeah. Coach, I tell my players all the time, I wish my coach would tell me to shoot, because my coach never once told me to shoot.
You're the dirty work guy.
I was.
That's a good quality, though.
I loved it. I loved, you know, I did basketball practice, and of course, as a pitcher, you got to go throw whatever your bullpen is, so you got to go throw 80 pitches, and everybody thinks, well, do you throw 80 pitches all at once? Well, no, you got to simulate a game. So the time, thank goodness we didn't have the time constraints then, because it would take, you know, an hour and a half to 2 hours to throw your bullpen work, and but I loved it. It was great.
Now lead us up to the interesting set of circumstances how you became women's basketball coach at Missouri Western, because I'm fascinated by the fact that you were never technically a full-time assistant coach at any point in your life. You got a break.
Well, I was kind of.
Well, you were full-time, but you weren't your grad assistant.
I know my assistants hate it when I tell them. I joke that I understand the grind of an assistant, because they're like, "Do you really?" Because I was only. You're right on that. It was. Well, I was more baseball in that I was really recruiting for Coach Menace at the time, and the program had slipped a little bit, and they really wanted me to recruit some players. So we actually had as good a recruiting class, very fortunate to get the guys we got in. And so the AD says, you know, I need you to be the assistant women's basketball coach. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. He said, well, I really want you to recruit, but, you know, help out with skill development, that kind of stuff. So I do it, and I really enjoyed it. We were awful. And at the end of the year, the head coach's mother had passed away, and her family had a huge ranch in southern Missouri that needed her to go down there, basically. So she resigned. Well, at the time, Missouri had a hiring freeze on state employees. There was
coaches?
Well, that you could get the emergency waiver, but it was also an easy excuse not to pay anybody to be the head coach.
And it doesn't sound like there was a lot of effort being put into the program. I mean, they're having you recruit baseball and women's basketball, and
it was just a different time. I mean,
Right,
that's
of course.
just kind of what you did
Well,
as a
that's the way it was
GA.
in the
You
80s,
just
yeah.
you were lucky enough. I totally viewed it as lucky to be doing what I was doing because you got to experience a lot of different things, and so they made me the interim coach. And to your point, they probably just did it because it was the easiest thing to do. And so I took it for that 9 months, and we were fortunate enough to be a little bit better.
Sure.
And then at the end of the year, I think they interviewed like 8 people before they hired me. So they really weren't that pleased with me. But Ed Harris, the AD, was a great guy, great mentor. And he wanted to hire me, but there were others involved
Sure.
that, as you always get into, that were like, we need to do a search, we need to get out there. So anyways, fortunate enough to get the job. And what I found was that I really loved coaching basketball more than I love baseball, but my personality is probably a little higher strung than baseball allows. So basketball allows me to get a little bit of that energy out.
How old were you when you did the interim gig? 24?
25.
25?
Yeah.
So interim 1 year, I think you won 16 games,
Yep.
which was an improvement. And then it just kind of took off for your next 2 years. What happened in there? Did you go out and find some serious players that really picked up the pace?
Probably just being young and dumb enough to think I could sign anybody in the country, and we kind of mixed some really good high school players with some really good junior college players, and that was so much fun because that's back when you could physically go sign them.
Sure.
So I signed an All-American, Tonya Foster, out of Butler County. Coach Osterman was actually dual assistant back then for me, so he had gotten Foster interested, and I can remember sitting in the coach's office waiting to see who Foster was going to sign with, because there were other coaches there as well.
Oh, how strange.
And it took about 2 hours for her to finally make the decision. It's good that they finally went away from that because it was just such a stressful. I mean, I can remember 11 o'clock at night getting a young lady at Trinity Valley to say yes to me on the phone and telling Shanna, I'm leaving. She goes, what do you mean you're leaving? I'm like, I'm driving to Athens right now. It was about a 10-hour drive. I'm like, I'm going to be there in the morning because I need this signature now. And, get into Athens and grab some IHOP and go sign her. Go sign her. But if you waited, you probably weren't getting that kid. And so it was just a different recruiting time. It was a ton of fun, though. Good to be young to do it, and ate a lot of meals at the Amico food shop right there in St. Joe, because that's where we had our little gas cards, and yeah, it was good stuff.
Ah, St. Joe. I was there for 8 months at the News Press Gazette.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You're the second coach now that I've had experience with sharing St. Joe stories, the first being Bill Snyder.
Yeah, right.
So it was
Yeah, coaches, he's got the pavilion there named after him now from his time in St. Joe.
You were there, you coached 3 seasons, were highly successful, and you're in their Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it was really cool to...
It didn't get to your athletic career, didn't get you there.
No. Boy, if it did, that wouldn't be a very good honor for the rest of the Hall of Famers there. But yeah, and the 2 teams that we had, the Elite 8 team the second year, and we had the Final 4 team the third year. So both those teams, and those teams, it's kind of funny because we really had them from all over the country. And yet when we've had reunions, about 80% of them will come back, and it's just they're connected for forever, just like athletics does to you.
That's nuts. In fact, I was in St. Joe 87, 88.
Yeah.
So you were in school?
I was. Yep, that would have been junior year.
Yeah. Spent a lot of time on the Belt Highway.
Belt. Too much time on the Belt Highway.
All I remember about St. Joe is that the only really good bar we could find was at the bowling alley.
Yeah.
So
You're absolutely correct on that, by the way, because that was that was kind of the dance club bar, you know. St. Joe has a lot of kind of like dive bars that are kind of...
Which I would appreciate more nowadays.
No question. One of my former players owns one of them. When we went back for the reunion, we always go there after the reunion stuff. And Mary Bach Garvey owns one of them now, and it's a great place to go to watch a game.
My two, these are both kind of inappropriate stories. The World's Worst Gentlemen's Club was in St. Joe. And also, one night we were in the Belt Bowl bar, whatever the name of it was, and there's like some commotion, things going on. There's like some kind of entertainment coming on, and we're just in there drinking, we're just minding our own business, but it was male stripper night, and nobody told us.
Really?
And all of a sudden, I'm like, well, this bar changed significantly. There's a reason a lot of women were showing up. Maybe it's time to go to another.
You know, the one thing I always found, I think always had a great time, there was a college hangout there called the Dugout. And it was out kind of by the hospital, if you remember where the hospital was. And that was nice because it was just college kids, basically. But St. Joe had such a mix of going around. It was an interesting town. But the Dugout was a place that you could go play some pool, watch a game, just hang out, and it was 90% college students, and that was a lot more fun.
I remember going across the river to a little tiny town, and some of the St. Joe Central coaches had a bar over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was the town? I can't even think. It was tiny.
I always felt like that city was like 3 cities in one.
It's a really strange city. Every high school kind of had their own area.
That's right.
And I remember going, this is like a little downtown
You go
area.
Lafayette, if you go Central, if you go Benton, you go, you're
crazy.
Right. You're right. And now it's gone straight north, the city. When we go back, if you go north, it looks totally different. That's where all the new businesses have gone. And
Interesting.
Yeah.
It has changed a lot since I was there.
Yeah.
How'd you meet Shanna?
Blind date. Blind date, yeah.
Are you one of the few blind dates in history to work out this well?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but blind date. Well, I cheated because I'd actually seen her, because I wasn't that convinced I was going to drive to Topeka to.
Yeah, because she was an athlete at Washburn.
She was at Washburn playing volleyball, and one of my good friends was a basketball player at Washburn.
Okay.
And I had just gotten back to Mo West and finishing up as a grad assistant, or kind of still right in the middle of it. And anyways, so they came to play volleyball at Mo West. I was talking to her friend, and then her friend kind of said, hey, you guys should, go out.
Do you forever owe that friend?
Yeah. Do
they remind you of that?
All the time.
Wow, that's
yes,
great.
and Sue actually still lives in Topeka, so she's actually come to some football games here, and it's been great to see her. But yeah,
Shannon was kind of a high school legend in these parts at Chapman.
Yeah,
And
Hall of
she was
Fame, Hall of Fame at Chapman. Yeah,
Yep.
she really was a heck of an athlete.
Really good volleyball player.
Really good.
So, you do the 3 seasons at MoWo, and you end up going to Arkansas State. How did that develop?
It wasn't any different than just
Any other time? And you're like 28 at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't any different in that job was open. Ironically, Arkansas State was a program that we had gotten to know a little bit, mainly because we were monitoring some of their junior college signees that might not make grades and might end up at D2. So in getting to know that staff, when Jerry Ann Winters left for South Alabama, it was just kind of, that'd be interesting to look at, and really just put out some feelers to see if they would be interested in, and then went down and interviewed, and it just worked out.
Coach Osterman with you the whole time?
No, he was on the men's side at that time.
Okay.
Yeah. Brian Boyer, who became the head coach at Arkansas State, who was my assistant the last 2 years, he came with me to Arkansas State.
Okay. What was your time like there?
It was good. It was good.
Really good record.
You know, it was an interesting job because you're in the Sun Belt.
Right.
You've got two programs that have been to Final Fours, Louisiana Tech, one of the historic programs, and you've got Western Kentucky and Paul Sanderford. And Arkansas State had been a good program, but tough sledding with those historic programs at the time. But we were able to get right up against them at third, and we were able to do some good things there. And we beat number 8 Virginia. We beat number 17 Kansas at the time with Marion Washington, and so we were able to knock off some of the ranked teams, and we did fairly well in the Sun Belt. Jonesboro was for us, it was a unique city. We had never been, Shannon and I had never been really south of Kansas City so much. We enjoyed Arkansas, though. We enjoyed Jonesboro. That's where we started our family. I mean, we had Logan young. Jordan was born in St. Joe, but I had already taken the job, so I flew back for his birth because I was already down in Jonesboro, and then Madison was born in Jonesboro.
Interesting. The 80s were kind of the time period where I feel like women's basketball evolved into the makings of what it is now. It's like people are like, okay, this is, it's not just the equality sport. You have men's and women's. Now it's kind of turned into a deal, and people are really beginning to pay attention to women's basketball. Pat Summitt, all that going on.
Yeah. When I took over at Mo West, I guess it would have been our second team. We had 4 ACLs in 6 months. And Vivian Stringer was at Iowa at the time, and she had a bunch of ACLs. Sports Illustrated was writing an article, and we're actually in the Penny Hardaway article, and so are a bunch of St. Joe doctors talking about the ACL in women's basketball. But I think at that time it started to really take off because they were starting to pay attention to how high of a level, but they were also starting to pay attention to the devastating injuries that were occurring.
What is, do you have an explanation for why women's basketball players, is just the construction of the knee or what?
Boy, I've talked to a lot of doctors on it. I could give you that females have a tendency to have the notch in the ACL is a little more narrow, so when it moves, I've heard doctors talk about that. I've heard doctors talk about just the physical demands, strength around it, all the muscles, all those things. I don't think anybody really knows. I believe we're further ahead than we've been, but we still haven't obviously solved it, and I don't think we ever will.
Yeah, it's just a very strange thing. So many women's players look like they've been at war. They've just got scars going everywhere on their knees. It's just amazing. I'm of the theory that we all know women are tougher than men because of childbirth, but after about 3 knee surgeries, most guys are like, I'm out. Unless they've got a really pro career on the line. Women's basketball players, I'm going to rehab this, come back. I'm going to rehab this, come back.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me how many times they've just had multiple surgeries and they just keep roaring back. And
my oldest daughter has had it. Madison came back from an ACL 2 years ago.
That's right, I forgot.
I ACL'd when I was 32 or 33. No, 31. But I didn't tear it completely, so I didn't have surgery. And then I finally tore it completely in the sand trap of a how about that?
Full contact golf?
Full contact golf. I'm swinging. I've got that, I'm in this trap, so I've, got it, anchored in there and swing, and I can just feel the whole thing go. And
it's a lovely feeling.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
So are you laying in the sand trap at this point?
No, I wasn't laying in it, but I was in a lot of pain.
And you're kind of screwed. You got to get out of the sand trap.
You got to get out of it, and there's about 9 holes left. And
did you finish?
I did.
Oh, for God's sake!
I did. Not very well, but I wasn't playing that well to begin with, so it wasn't much different.
Yeah, I guess you can play through an ACL with golf. It's kind of...
Well, we were playing, had about 8 of us, middle of July, and we had a little money on it going.
Okay. A little pride involved.
Yeah, we had a little pride involved. So
some beer maybe
involved? We had to suck it up a little bit on the course.
TCU opens up. You end up there, and in some ways that's home. I mean, you were there, what, 15 seasons?
Yeah, 15
Dude, that's
years.
That's a long time.
You know, in coaching, yeah, it's a long time. I think I've told people this before. It probably, the one thing that at the time of taking that job, because of where TCU was at. So we were in the WAC when I took the job.
That's right.
So we're in the WAC. We're going to move to Conference USA. I don't know this at the time, right? We're just in the WAC. But the decision about a year and a half later is to go Conference USA. So we go Conference USA. About 4 years into that, AD calls me and says, hey, I want to talk to you about something. We're thinking about the Mountain West. We think this is a great move for football. We think that...
and it was?
Yeah. And he was just asking me, hey, help me know about the Mountain West women's basketball so I'm knowledgeable about it. What do you think about it? And it had some really good programs in there, BYU, Utah, all these programs you've seen Advanced, San Diego State, New Mexico, very good programs. So, but the challenging part was being the only Central Time Zone team. So that was part of the tough decision of doing that, because going west and being the outlier with all the time changes, that was challenging. But go to Mountain West. So we go in the Mountain West. Then I don't know how many years we're in the Mountain West. I can't remember. But then we joined the Big East.
I forgot about that.
Never play in the Big East. I do have a old polo from the conference meetings, because we did do conference meetings. And then in the fall, the Big 12 invites TCU in. And so I think what kept it exciting was obviously all the changes, right? Mm-hmm. So you didn't get stale. I don't know, stale might be the wrong word for it, because certainly if you were in one league, I don't know that you get stale either, but it was definitely challenging.
New challenges, new teams.
And new ADs. We had ADs that were different, because Eric Hyman hired me. Danny Morrison came in. Danny left to take this one of the business CEOs of the Carolina Panthers, and then Chris Del Conte came in after Danny, and Chris is now down at Texas. Yep.
Very interesting. So you coached in 4 leagues at one school?
4 leagues at one school, yes. And was a part of 5, I guess, if you want to count the 6 months of the Big East.
I'm not going to count that. It's not really. You just don't get a.
You don't get to count the fact.
Yeah, you don't show up the frat party. And you're in the frat.
I had to sit through the meetings.
No, that's a badge of honor right there.
Yeah.
What was the toughest transition in there? Going Mountain West to Big 12, or is another one?
Well, definitely Mountain West to Big 12. And I think the toughest part of that transition was just the fact that it happened so fast, because it wasn't like, oh, in a year and a half you're going to be in the Big 12. It was, you're going from the Mountain West, and next year you're in the Big 12. So from a recruiting cycle, you
didn't have time to ramp up.
No, and we knew we didn't have a Big 12 roster.
And that was your worst season of coaching, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was a struggle.
But I made the decision to go super young, because I knew that if we're going to take our lumps, let's do it, and let's take our lumps 1 year. So we started 3 freshmen that year. Oh. One of them ends up being the all-time leading scorer at TCU in Zayna Medley, and that team really battled that year, and really for as young as they were, we were able to keep them positive. We were able to keep them battling, and then it paid off the next year. We're able to beat Texas for the first time in school history and do some better things.
In the heart of you're 15 years old. You had 10 out of 12 seasons with 20 or more wins. You got it rolling. I mean,
well, we had some. I mean, it's all about players. You just have to have players, and if you can get good players and get committed kids, I think you got a chance. I think all these jobs in the Big 12 or whatever league you're in, most of them are good jobs, but they're also challenging jobs. Every coach, I believe, has to figure out their particular job. Because you look at the Big 12, they're all good universities. They all have good things. It's, can you figure out your particular job and do it well? And every job's a little bit different.
And you got to coach your daughter. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that was. And she had come off her 3rd knee surgery and wasn't going to play. And then she comes to me in probably June or July and says, I miss it. Do you mind if I walk on? And I said, no, that'd be great. And yeah, it was great. It was challenging at times because every kid wants to play, and she played some, but not as much as her mother would have liked.
Oh,
and
man.
Yeah, I know, and because I don't talk to parents about playing time, that became
become a problem.
Yeah.
If I know your wife, you couldn't really tell her that rule.
I really couldn't. You're right. You're absolutely right. Now it was a lot of fun to see her, and then it was a lot of fun to be at practice with Logan because you miss so much as a coach of your own kids playing.
Right.
You're
kind of going through that now.
Yeah, and if I go back to high school, I probably saw Logan play, I'd say 40% of her games. Madison probably the same. I was able to see Jordan more football just because you only had one game a week and our season didn't start. But you do miss those moments, and to be able to spend a little bit of time for a couple years. Logan decided after midway through her sophomore year, she said, look, I'm healthy. I'd like to leave healthy. And I said, I think that's probably a good decision because she'd already had, I think she'd had 4 knee surgeries, 3 major ones, and I think a cleanup in there somewhere. Yeah.
No.
And now
that's a good move, just getting out.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's a better decision. I don't fault either decision, but if you I think for any kid, I think it's a good decision.
Well, I'm not done with TCU yet, but we are done with the first half of the Power Chat, and we will get Coach Mittie to Manhattan, Kansas right after this break. Welcome back to the Power Chat with women's basketball coach Jeff Mittie here in the WTC Gig Powered Studios. And, of course, we're sponsored by Blue Mark Energy. If you need natural gas, make sure you check out Blue Mark Energy. Okay, so you're TCU. Shannon's a professor there? I didn't realize until doing research. She has a PhD?
She does. She does.
What was her area of teaching?
Well, early childhood development in psychology. So she has her doctorate. She did her doctorate after all the kids got into school and kind of midway through. Amazingly that she did it because I'm like the 4th child, because all the events that we have. But yeah, she was getting her master's at TCU, and she gets an email from a professor that says you should get your doctorate. She was doing so well in his area that he's like, so he recommended her, and she ended up getting her doctorate at TCU and teaching and doing research there.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
She actually taught here at Kansas State too.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe the first year back, and so she's not teaching now, but yeah, she likes it.
Very good. You ended up in Manhattan. You came after the job in some ways, didn't you?
Well, I definitely had an interest.
Right.
I definitely had an interest. I think that any time that there is one, in this profession, you never know what's going to happen.
Sure.
I did not think that there was going to be a change made, I've always had an interest, Shannon and I have always had an interest in coming back to the Midwest. We've always known a lot about Kansas State because of Brad Seib and my sister. And we've spent a lot of time with K-Staters. When K-State played in the Cotton Bowl, we tailgated with a bunch of them down in Texas. So we've always followed Kansas State. And I've always felt like in women's basketball, this was such a good place to be. Fan support, knowledgeable, all those things. So yeah, so when it opened, in just seeing what K-State might do, there was mutual interest, so we just kind of took it from there.
Yeah, when Deb Patterson really had it rolling, I mean, they're selling out the venue.
Yeah.
I mean, that's notable in women's basketball.
It is.
You're not just letting people in. I don't know how much tickets cost, but they're actually buying a ticket to be there.
Yeah. I think that's even gotten, probably everybody across the country, we see a lot of articles now, that's getting tougher and tougher because of TV.
Right.
Now you can, ESPN Plus, you can sit there and watch every game. So now those challenges going forward for all of us, football, you're seeing football. I'm amazed at some of the football stadiums I'm seeing that don't have people in them like you would think they should. But I think here at Kansas State, we've got a good fan base. We've got a loyal fan base, and we need to win, and we win, I think people will be there. We were talking casually between sections here about your huge TV. Those TVs are why people aren't showing up to games. You can sit in your house and watch a game on a 60-inch TV, never leave your recliner. It's pretty tempting. There was a night last week that there were 3 games on ESPN Plus that I had an interest in watching. Arkansas Oral Roberts was one of them, obviously, because we just played Oral Roberts, but we also play Arkansas here. There was, I can't even remember the other 2 games. Oh, Notre Dame and Michigan State. We might play Michigan State in the Bahamas. And so, yeah, I sat there for 2.5 hours and kind of getting some work done, but also just enjoying watching a bunch of basketball. Yeah, it's really cool, and it's really, for the sport of women's basketball, it might hurt attendance, but the fact that all this is available for fans of the game just to watch is a total change. It's never been that way. It is. I think what you're seeing, and I think you'll continue to see this across the country, not just in women's basketball, but I think the venues are going to get smaller. I agree. I think people are going to, the amenities people expect, I think you'll see more of that. When we eventually get to Bramlage, I think you'll see more amenities, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the final design it's not as big as it is now. You look at what we're doing for volleyball, that venue is going to be a unique venue. So I just think you're going to see that in television. All the good that comes from being able to follow your teams also creates some challenges, probably especially for us because our fans drive a pretty good distance to the game sometimes. And so, yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. I think when they finally redo Bramlage, they'll probably put in more premium seating areas, boxes or whatever, and the actual benches number will go down, which is just a reality of the marketplace. I think so, and I don't think that's bad. I mean, I love Bramlage, but it's definitely too big for women's basketball. You just don't see them. So I do think that when the redo, I'll be curious. They'll come out with a lot of the design concepts and everybody will kind of go through them, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it that way. As a longtime K-Stater, I'm not a fan of Bramlage. Really? They should probably have never left a Hearn, but they did for a variety of reasons. It was my generation at Kansas State that voted to build Bramlage, and what we voted on is not what we got at all. So I will be fascinated to see if they can make Bramlage feel more, less sterile maybe, a little more homey and unique, because it just kind of is a bowl right now, which is nice. It's held up well. Yeah, it seems to be a better venue now than it was then. If that makes sense. Okay. I mean, because back then in the late '80s, there were so many of
the old barns still around that
Yeah.
had this real feel to it. And then you built this big,
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. That it's kind of funny, the design trends that go. You can see, everybody in the 60s built it this way. Everybody in the 80s built this. San Diego State is very similar to Bramlage. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to guess it's around the same time frame, because it is exactly the long steps down. There's no restrooms. You got to go all the way up. It's
There's an easy way to build it. Dig a hole, fill it
yeah,
in.
yeah.
At TCU, ironically, I think their redo, they got it right. It's not a big venue, it never was.
Right.
It's really nice in there.
Yeah, I was part of that design. I was on that committee. I did not coach in that building until I got to Kansas State. I like it. I don't like the floor. I don't like the floor. I don't like the floor. The floor is slick. It's
interesting.
I don't know why that is, but it is slick. And I just don't like the look of that. But I do think they got it right in the other areas, because it's a 7,000 seat arena. They kept it pretty similar. They did get it closer to the floor. There was a lot of space behind the benches, and I think that's an improvement.
Because that was an old, 40s, 50s roundhouse.
50s,
Yeah.
just like Ole Miss. So you had that roundhouse. Ole Miss has a similar design, and Wichita State had that design. Yeah. They since redid theirs, and very similar. Matter of fact, I flew up to Wichita State with a group because they compared TCU's arena to Wichita State's.
Interesting.
And Wichita State did that redesign where they got the seats closer to the floor.
So you start investigating this K-State job. When did you go, yeah, I want this job?
I
mean, sometimes you can go out and go.
John moves pretty quick.
Yeah, he did.
John moves pretty quick. I would say that it's hard to remember the timeline of that, but I would say about the third discussion, which was probably 6 or 7 days into it, and maybe the whole thing took 8 days. I can't remember exactly the timeline of it, but it kind of went from just this, hey, we might have some interest in talking further. I sense that they weren't, everybody's always trying to get a feel of, are you serious about looking?
Right. You're not just playing us for a raise.
Yeah, are you really going to leave TCU? And John was pretty upfront about, hey, help me through this. We had built a house in Texas, and we had built that house in 2010, and had been there 4 years. And I've never been one that I like our houses, but I mean, it's a house.
Yeah.
It's a house. I mean, our family's more important in terms of. We had a lot of reasons. Excited about Kansas State. We had family reasons, time to maybe come back to the area. We just had a lot of really good reasons that made sense for us. So once we started having deeper discussions, I knew that I was all in.
It was a surprising hire from our end. It was like, oh, that's unexpected,
Yeah.
A guy with a good run, 15-year run. That's a long time to spend at any place. That does, even though you mentioned that about a house, that does become home. That the city. I like Fort Worth. I think Fort Worth's a cool place.
We loved Fort Worth, and we loved TCU, and the fact that we raised our kids there. I mean, you're right. We've got a lot of really good friends there. But coming back to Kansas State, or I say coming back to the Midwest, has been uniquely special to us in that, my dad was at the game last night, and we had coffee this morning, and you don't get very many of those.
No.
Shanna's family, she lost her stepdad and her mom and her dad in the last 3 years, but we got some good quality time with them here in the last 4 years that you wouldn't have gotten. On a home football game right now, we'll have as many as 15 people at the house. And so these are just, and then you throw in, I always said, look, we ain't going back to the Midwest, and the job's important. The job's got to be a full commitment, and K-State's all in. and we have everything we need to be successful. So there were so many good reasons, and I wanted a place that also had the fan support, that had a college town. I hadn't really coached in a college town because Fort Worth is, and so I really wanted that. I wanted the fact that it mattered to people, that when we play our rival Kansas, there's going to be 7,000 or 8,000 people in there. So that's been a really fun part of this.
So you coach one daughter at TCU, and Madison starts with you here, but she ends up at Fort Hays State.
Yep.
And that can't be easy. Simultaneous seasons.
Right.
And trying to find chances to go see her. I imagine Shannon makes it out there a little bit more. But
she makes it out there virtually every game, and obviously the MIAA plays in our area, Emporia, Washburn, Missouri Western, Central Missouri, all those games are in the area. So, yeah, she'll make almost every one of them. That's kind of why she's not teaching now, because she's like, I'm only going to get so many more opportunities to follow the kids around. Nice. And I make it out as much as I can. I was able to make it out Friday. Usually Shannon will drive the 215 out there, and I'll work on film on the way out there, and I usually take the drive home is kind of how it works. I mean, you're always kind of trying to make the most of your time, both work and getting to see Madison. But yeah, that's been they were 32-2 last year. Got to coach against her a couple times. She hit a 3 this year exhibition. She had a pretty good game in here. So, yeah, it's been fun to watch her and her teammates play.
Did you box and win her just for the hell of it? You can do
no,
these things. You're the boss. You're the coach and the dad. You can throw the box and one at your own daughter.
Yeah. I could have, but we didn't. Yeah.
And Jordan transfers up to play football. He was at Texas State?
Texas State, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that
That's cool.
wasn't.
That's amazing.
Well, and it wasn't, people kind of think it was planned, right? Mm-hmm. Not at all. I mean, not at all. He came home for Christmas. They'd had a rough year. He was going to graduate early. He was a unique grad transfer with 2 years left, and he said, look, I want to play with a winning program. I want to have the opportunity to go to a bowl, and, they're telling recruits that, a couple, 2-3 years we're going to be good. And he said, I don't have that many years left. So in that process, I just, I kind of turned coach in that. Right. I'm like, well, you're going to have to take a leap of faith here, because you owe it to Texas State to tell them. We're not going to do what a lot of people do, is go find you a scholarship while you haven't told them. And I said, so you need to think about this. This is probably, I don't know, mid-December, let's say. And I said, and that was the first year of the early signing. I said, with the early signing, I don't know how many scholarships are going to be available. Mm-hmm. So you're really going to have to just trust that there'll be some out there. So he was pretty set on it. He let Texas State know, and Memphis was the first to offer him. Kansas State didn't have anything, and K-State was pretty honest about, hey, right now we're just not in a position to offer you a scholarship. And then all of a sudden he called me and he said, hey, I'm supposed to talk to Coach Snyder tomorrow. So this is probably 2 weeks later. And Coach called and offered him a scholarship, and he took a visit up here and sat down with the coaches and felt comfortable about the position and all the things that he was way more knowledgeable about than I am. He wanted to ask all the, hey, where do you see me on the D line? What, all the technical terms.
I find it interesting that when he signed, we thought, okay, this is going to be a good rotation guy. You need a lot of bodies in there. He's turned into a legitimate Big 12 defensive tackle. He's really good.
I think he's had a good career. I mean, hopefully they can finish strong. Yeah. I think that's the one thing that, he had great high school coaches. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were fortunate enough to win 3 state titles. Now, he was a middle linebacker at the time, so the position change and all that. But, he's been around winning coaches that have really helped him. Work ethic, discipline, toughness, good teammate, all the things that good programs have. And Texas State treated him like a young man. They treated him well. It was just the program was in a different rebuilding phase. And so for him to have this opportunity and then make the most of it, that's the thing. You get an opportunity, but you then have to put the work in. And then to go through the coaching changes, new coaches come in. Now you got to redo it again. But that's okay. That's life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's life. You ought to be waking up every day to be better than you were the day before, and he'll find that out when he gets in his profession. I mean, all those things will be great life lessons.
Trust me. Quick change happens. Sudden change happens. And
yes.
Okay.
As you know, right?
Yeah.
Right.
This is your life now, and you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
You can't sit around and worry about it. And as we record this, they've gotten to the 6-win threshold. So he will get to play in that bowl game. We don't know what bowl it is, but that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that was one of his stated goals when he said, transfer. I want to play in a bowl game, and they narrowly missed it last year with the last game at Iowa State, and then that was disappointing,
Yep.
and then with the coaching change. The one thing I think about it's been so much fun to be able to watch him because I only saw 2 or 3 games a year at Texas State.
Right.
That's the one thing that if he was playing down at Texas State and we had a home football game here, there's a pretty good chance that we had recruits here.
Right.
And so I just would not be able to go. We've got a job to do here, and if I would always get the schedules out and go, oh, this will work, this will work, this will work, these other 8 won't work.
Mm-hmm.
Now with Kansas State, I've been able to see almost every game this year, and
Nice.
That's been a lot of fun.
Very nice. This team that you have this year, there's something about it. You were picked 5th, and you weren't happy about being picked in the middle of the pack in the Big 12. You've got a really nice core, and Peyton Williams is a special athlete, probably in some ways one of a kind.
Well, certainly what she's doing is unique, and she's has a special ability to pick things up very, very quickly. So, I don't think you could do it if you weren't able to pick things up quickly, and that's still challenging for in our game last night. There were about 3 things that she messed up on because she just hasn't had the reps. We're running a play we call Sky, and she's running a play we call Dream.
Yeah.
And she's the only one running Dream. And then she comes to the bench and says, actually, I was running Sparks. And I'm like, oh, wow, we're way off the map here.
Yeah.
And so there's just those things of having reps. But, going back to being picked 5th, we finished 4th last year.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, the chip on your shoulder always at K-State is a little bit like they never appreciate our players as much as I think they should.
I think you're right.
And it just, I don't know, for lack of a better word, it pissed me off.
Yeah.
But preseason polls, I never make that much out of them. But where I get sensitive to is that I get very protective of our players.
Sure.
I get very protective of the program, and it is a benefit to start 3rd because then people out there are going, well, if you're the 3rd best team in the Big 12, then now all of a sudden you're showing up in the rankings. And those are type of things that we'll have every opportunity to prove them wrong. And that's on us to prove them wrong. So we'll have every opportunity. But even for like Peyton, I was irritated with the Big 12 that she wasn't Player of the Week. She had 19 boards in 22 minutes.
That's crazy.
Against Omaha. A double-double. And, oh, by the way, she played volleyball 2 nights earlier. And I got on the phone with the Big 12 and I said, explain this to me. And I said, the process, and that's a whole nother story. We could have a whole nother podcast on that conversation that I had with the Big 12 on that.
I've always said that Kansas State programs are always judged by what they lost, and other programs in this conference, going back to the Big 8, are judged by what they return and what they gained. it's just kind of the way. Oh, look at all the stuff, everything K-State lost.
Yeah.
And similar program south of here, let's say, might have similar losses, but look at these players they've added.
Right.
And so it's just kind of an ongoing frustration with anyone who's been around K-State sports.
Well, part of it, I know that part of it is the Texas influence. I was down there, and they all know the recruits that they're signing, and they have a high opinion of,
And there's more reporters voting in Texas.
There is, and so a player like Aoka Lee, who we signed out of small town Minnesota, they don't know anything about.
Right.
And I tell people, if she was in the middle of Texas, that kid's going to be recruited by everybody.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. And you're right, there are more reporters down there. There's more people covering the recruiting process in women's basketball. And so that already puts them up. But anyways, I mean, like I said, we'll get every opportunity to prove them wrong.
We talked about this before we started this because we ran into problems scheduling basketball student athletes to come in here and sit down because they have a clock now. This is only so many hours they can do their sports-related activities. How do you manage that with the two-sport athlete? Two-sport athletes have been around for a long time, but there didn't used to be this container in which they had to pour everything they do. That's got to be really difficult.
Yeah, the difficult thing is Peyton has to take Sunday off.
Right.
We played yesterday, Monday, so she had zero prep time for the Monday game. And while we can do other things, she can get her scouting report on Friday. We have to do some things uniquely with her that I'll give you an example. We had our fours guarding their best player last night. Now, it was not a good matchup for us. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a good matchup for Peyton because she hasn't had the reps defensively, hasn't had the reps in guarding what she was going to have to guard last night. I decided to leave it because I'm like, this is our chance for her to practice it, basically.
Right.
And this is our chance for us to kind of be exposed a little bit and figure out our answers. Now, in a game where maybe it was closer, we would have had to make a switch there.
Right.
Fortunately, we played so well offensively that we were able to stay with it and force them to kind of be uncomfortable most of the night. But yeah, it is a unique situation. She's doing some great things, and she had a solid game last night.
When you go out recruiting, what do you look for in players? And what is of course you want good players, good athletes, but there's got to be qualities that you seek in people that'll fit into your locker room.
Yeah, I think all the things that you're looking for, first and foremost, you want good teammates. You want players that are unselfish, players that have you can tell that when you talk to people that their team attitude is where it needs to be. We like to find out what else are they doing that isn't basketball related that shows that they're a motivated individual. For example, Kayla Goth was black belt in karate.
Didn't know that.
Took her 5 years to get it. So it wasn't just this easy process. So you want to look at kids like that have some things that you say, well, that's unique. That's unique. Then you get to the skill level of what you're looking for. The balance is trying to find enough athletes. You got to have athletes. Mm-hmm. You got to have some players that can make some plays that aren't scripted.
Right.
That can play out of a situation and go make some plays. And then you guys have some players that fit in the system. We have wanted size because feel like that's a kid that'll be, we can get a niche there with our centers. We've got a good reputation with Brianna Lewis playing for us. We had a good reputation at TCU of good centers. Sandor Irvin was the number 3 pick. So we can sell that to recruits, and we've been successful there doing that.
And you need them in this conference. You've got some pretty good competition in this conference.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt.
Baylor's something special.
Well, and then you just look at Texas, 6'5". Charlie Collier was the #1 recruit in the country 2 years ago. She's at Texas. Sedona Prince was at Texas. She was a #5 recruit. She now has since transferred to Oregon. I was excited when she left Texas, and then we have Oregon on the schedule. Now we have to play, you know. So, but you do have to have some size, and but there won't be. I think we have the potential to have a front line right there with Baylor's, with Lee and Williams. They're going to have Cox, DeGrate, and Egbo, and I think we are right there with them.
Well, you're off to a good start. You get to go to the Bahamas, and it'll be interesting to see how this season develops, but you'll have a lovely tan. Probably. I
won't, but some others on the trip may. You know, it's always it's a work trip for us. The nice thing is you can pull out the laptop and you're looking at some water, and it's usually about 75, 80 degrees, so it's not bad. Yep. Yeah, it's not bad.
So one of our traditions here at GoPowerCat.com is we have a podcast called The Overtime, which we let people ask us anything, not always sports related. So we've brought it over to the Power Chats, and we've asked someone from our website, one of our users, Hoove4KSU, to ask you 5 off-the-cuff questions. So
okay.
Here we go. Kind of quick here.
All right.
You could have been a baseball coach.
Yep.
Why do baseball coaches wear uniforms, and why don't basketball coaches wear their players' uniforms? And would you?
I would not.
Okay.
I don't think anybody
That's the right answer.
I don't think anybody wants to see me in a basketball uniform.
Okay.
I do not know why baseball managers wear uniforms. I suppose that it goes back to a long-standing tradition of that back when there were player managers.
Zach, you got it. Yep, Zach got that right.
So that would be my guess, right?
Yep.
And
just seems like a weird thing to continue. If I got a baseball managerial job, I'd show up in a nice little sweatsuit and say, I'm not wearing the pants with the little belt.
The one thing I would say is that the one thing about baseball is that, you know, a lot of managers will still get out there and hit fungos, and that's just part of kind of the stuff you like to do as a baseball coach. Yeah, right. Why?
While working for the Royals, did you have any moment, you mentioned you were in charge of talking to the other managers, that you found yourself starstruck by someone you were dealing with?
Yeah, I think all the time. In that I didn't mention this earlier, but one of the other things I was in charge of was player interviews before the game, of which they hated to do. So that was always
that's a weird baseball thing.
Yeah, and it was always kind of go down in the clubhouse and, hey, you got an interview at 4:50 or whatever, and I'm not doing that interview. Okay, you know the drill. I'm gonna have to go upstairs, tell them you're not doing the interview. They're gonna send me back down. And so starstruck, they made it very clear. No autographs, no nothing. You're not here to be starstruck.
I'm staying with my guys. I don't sign autographs.
So I would say that they made it very clear that you couldn't do that, but it was still hard to not be in the elevator going, oh man, I'm in the elevator with, you know, and those guys are my age. I'm 23, 24 years old, so a lot of them are 23, 24, 25 years old.
My weird moment was briefly, George Brett did a radio show on WHB. And so I'm a guest, and I have George Brett asking me sports questions. Like, this is like bizarro world. I don't know what's going on here. Your brother-in-law is Brad Seib, former K-State football player. If you could pick, I doubt it'd be lifting, but if you could pick an athletic endeavor to beat Brad's butt in, what would you pick?
Golf? Oh, be golf every time. Be golf every time.
Is he a bad golfer?
He's like me. He's inconsistent.
Has he ever played through injury like you did with the knee?
What did he? I think he was trying to
hangnail once?
I think hangnail, and he actually tore his pec lifting. trained to lift too much for a 40-year-old, of course, right?
Yeah.
So I don't remember him necessarily playing through that one. I don't think I think he uses that as an excuse.
I don't think a torn pec and golf go well together.
But we do get out to play golf quite a bit. We've played a tournament here, No Stone Unturned, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, we'll play golf. I don't know, 5-6 times a year.
Kind of a two-parter here. Who's a better athlete, you or Shanna?
Shanna.
Yeah. Does she make you call her doctor?
No, she doesn't. But she would like it if I would.
And finally, let's wrap this up. And let me mention again, the person who asked this question is named Hoove for KSU. Who's your favorite SID you've ever had prior to working with Randy Peterson at K-State?
I've had so many. Probably the most unique one was Matt Hoover.
Well, I'll be darned.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Yeah.
And he's a big K-Stater too. So
he's a good dude.
He is a good dude. And get to see him occasionally, bump into him occasionally. He'll be yelling at me when I'm on the sidelines at a few football games. But yeah, nice questions, Hoove. Yeah.
He was well prepared. I like it when they're well prepared. Coach, thank you very much for doing this. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks, Fitz.
That'll wrap it up for this edition of the Power Chat. We will see you next season with more Power Chat.